Testing. Okay, seems like it's working better now. Sorry about that, guys. There's some audio delay. So, what's Art Lounge? It's space for artists, ones aspiring, or those who enjoy it, to come together and share ideas, thoughts, expression, and creation. Whether you're an illustrator, a writer, a musician, sculptor, comedian, dancer, architect, or someone who enjoys art in general, this space is for you. Welcome back, everyone, to the fifth part of Figure Drawing Basics. I had a couple of technical issues with the computer, so I had to start a little bit later, unfortunately, but I will get this fixed. So I just wanted to go over, actually, a bit of the intro. I've listed all those different interests, I guess, different fields of art, but it's not just limited to all that. It's actually a lot broader than that. I just wanted to give people an idea, because sometimes when people use the word artist, they always, or it seems to me from the times that I've had discussions with people, that they refer to illustrators or people who are drawing or painting or something. Whereas it really does go beyond that. It's not just illustration, it's not just musicians. Pretty much all those fields that I listed, they're also considered to be an artist field. But it does extend beyond those fields as well. And at some point I will cover that as well. But just for now, just to give you an idea, I think that the term artist is very broad. It's not just for illustration. So with that said, I wanted to start off by doing a little overview of what we did yesterday. And that was just to show you how you could use like the cylinder shape and how important it is within the body itself. And there were just many examples that I was showing how it actually shapes the forms of the body. So for example, let's see, over here, as you could see, that even the torso could be shaped into a cylinder shape. And I did a little demonstration again, just to remind you guys the 3 tones to remember when you're doing shading. And one of the great opportunities to practice shading would be in one of these guys. Now, I'm not like sponsoring this company or anything like that. It's just that it's a small notebook. It's soft cover, so you could easily put it into your pocket, into your book bag. It's not really going to get in the way. It's pretty thin, but it has enough pages to actually hold you over for a little bit. If you actually fill up all the pages, as I did here, just all over, fit as much as you can into a single page. And it's just a great opportunity for you to like practice basic shapes, how to shade them. This is just one of the examples. You're using a cylinder and you could just establish a source for yourself, a light source for yourself. And then from that light source, you could try to practice your shading and get the direction of the shading correctly as well. And as you can see, it's consistent for both. It's consistent for the bottom shape and a top shape, which I sometimes find would be the case with people who are just starting out. They kind of forget that, the light source affects every single object, and it's the shading should be consistent on pretty much all parts of it. And we'll go further into that today, actually, when I'll be covering the head and just demonstrating ways you could shade it as well, or how the shadows affect different parts of the face. So yeah, just that brief overview. Definitely get yourself one of these. Practice all over, draw the shapes all over, and do the gradations as well. This will help you, as I was showing you guys before, just doing that all over the page, or just dedicate a page to just filling it up as much as possible with all these different gradations. And it's just a way to practice having more control over your hand, being able to press harder when you need to, be light when you need to. And that's just one of the most important things about, especially when you're first starting out to draw, is having more control over that. You want to condition yourself. You want to learn the good habit of sketching lightly and having to press when you need to, as opposed to just being totally out of control with that and pressing hard on the paper when you don't need to, when it's not going to be advantageous for you, especially when you're just sketching out parts of the body, when you're trying to establish the boundaries to work within. You don't really want to start by pressing really hard. So this just kind of helps. These like gradation practices help with that control. You're keeping in mind throughout the entire time, for the entire page, for however long that you're sketching, to keep lightly and then press harder for the midtones, and then press even harder for the shadows. And you want to make as much of a smooth transition as possible. So that should be like the goal when you're practicing the gradations, is to establish a smooth transition from highlights to midtones to shadows. And it's fun. It's like kind of mindless, but at the same time, you're keeping these principles in mind. It's pretty easy. You're not really doing anything. So it's definitely worth doing that. And then you can transfer that onto like objects. When the next page, when you're doing basic shapes, you can start out with the circle and apply the same thing by doing like the highlights as a light shade, and then midtones. And notice when, even in this example, that it's not just straight lines going across. You're not doing a circle, establishing the highlight, and then doing the midtone, and then doing the shadow at the bottom. You could see that when I'm doing these gradations, I'm kind of giving them a curve to follow the shape of the object and how the light would affect a specific object. So for the circle, there would be this curve since the light source is coming from the top. So you can see I'm giving the shadows the same thing, a curve. Now you could just keep it simple. You could just practice doing the basic shape and then doing these straight gradations just for fun. It still looks pretty good. It still looks like you're giving it some dimension by establishing it. But just having another goal to set for yourself once you feel more confident doing the gradations, doing the basic shapes, getting the results that you're looking for. And yeah, you could set that as another thing to do. Just to go over, the most important thing about basic shapes, especially with the circle, is that is the foundation for the head, which is going to be the unit of measurement for the rest of the body, as we discussed in like the previous streams when we were doing measurements. So yeah, once you draw out the circle, once you get better at drawing the circle, you don't want it to be oblong, you don't want it to be like kind of wonky, because that's going to be what you're going to use to make sure that the rest of the body is proportionate, that the figure is anatomically correct. So practice drawing the basic circle, because you're going to be using it for most of the drawing as well. Even when you're doing like the cylinder shape, you start out with the circle, and it is two circles, one bigger than the other. And that allows you to establish the proper curves. And as you can see, like this could be pretty much the foundation for the hand. The cylinder shape. Part of the wrist, if it's foreshortened. That's the other part of the arm, the shoulder, which also can be drawn with the circle and then later given dimension. Just a quick demonstration of how important it is to practice all these basic shapes, especially when you're first starting out. If you guys have any questions, post it in the comments, post it on social media. If you haven't had a chance to be part of the live stream, I'll get back to you. I'll either write you back or I'll talk about it in the next stream. So with that said, let's jump into today's lesson. So I wanted to do some hand demonstration. I'm going to do one, because I am going to go into detail, and then we'll jump into drawing the head. And then, of course, we'll revisit this. So, this is just for the sake of quick demonstration. Again, using basic shapes, because you don't want to start by drawing like the fingers, for example, and then getting more and more into detail, and then realizing, oh man, it's a little too big here and here, or it's like bleeding out and going further and further out, when the fingers should be closer together, and the palm of the hand is just way too wide. So this is kind of like the benefit of having to use these basic shapes. As you could see for the palm, and where the fingers extend, it's kind of like a rectangle, square-ish shape, somewhere in between it. The thumb, I like to think of it as like fries. It's like the basic shape of them is like French fries. And same thing for other parts of the fingers. And of course, that's not what the real deal looks like. That's not what real hand or fingers really look like. But just to establish yourself some boundaries to work within. We're going to give it a little bit more dimension now. And notice, and this is something I was talking about before, the space recognition between objects, or between lines even, and the direction in comparison to each other. So for example, I'm going to try to draw the dimension here. And once I establish one side, let's say I establish this side right here, I know that the next side is going to follow it. It's going to be parallel to each other. So that's just like a tool to use on how to create perspective properly. You know, just a little hack, I guess, on how to do it. And the same thing for this. Once you establish one side, you draw a line, the next side should be parallel to it as well. Same thing here. Now the size of them could vary, right? This one is longer than this one, for example. You could vary the size of these boundaries, but they're still parallel to each other. Now this is where the wrist is, another cylinder shape. For the sake of making it more basic. Also take note of the limits of the thumb, for example. Like, how far does it extend? Does it extend all the way? No, it comes to about like half of where the knuckles would be, or the first part of the knuckles on the hand, or the fingers rather. So look out for that as well, because that really changes how the hand looks, whether it looks proportionate or not. You don't want to draw the thumb way too long. It's just not going to look right. So right about to where the first set of the knuckles begin, that's where like the thumb ends when you draw it. Maybe like a little bit shorter, and you could always refer to your own hand, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be this. You could look at like, okay, well, how far what is the limit of this? Like looking at your own hand, this is where like the first set of the knuckles are. You got 1, 2, so like almost up to where they are, maybe a little bit less than that. Some hands vary, but I think for the most part that's just the general anatomical rule for it. So study your own hand, despite this being this kind of a drawing, you could still use your own as a reference. So just to draw that again, and from there I'm going to show you guys how you could develop more of the features. So we start off with that, and then the second half is where the fingers are. Notice it's also like a cub shape as well. It's not exactly the same as this. You're not just drawing two squares or two rectangles next to each other. It's a bit of a cup shape, but it's flat. It's a flat cup shape. And they're relatively about the same size. Like from here to here is about the same size as here to here. Maybe that the palm is bigger, but again, you could refer to your own hand and you could measure it out. Like, or even use the pencil from here to here. You could see, for at least for my hand, that's the case. The palm, from like the bottom, the very bottom of the palm to like the longest finger. You could see it's a little bit, it's like an inch bigger than the fingers. And then from there, from the side, we could just add on the thumb. If there's something that you guys want to have to be reviewed, post it in the chat, post it in the comments. I'll take a look and I'll review it for you guys, explain it in different terms or show you some examples to make it easier. It's not important how quickly you learn it. It's important on you just being able to learn it. So I don't mind explaining things better or in a different way, because I think everybody has different ways of learning or understanding the same subject. So sometimes it's more effective to try to explain it in a different method or a different light, for the sake of just getting the material across. That's all that really matters. Like, if you guys can pick up on how to draw hands better, that's all that really matters. So we're going to divide the fingers into 4 sections. And then from here, we can start sketching out more detail. So you're going to redefine the fingers more, give them curves, establish where the knuckles are. And really, you might have seen this plenty, but there is a curve to it. There's a curve for the fingers, from the tip of the fingers. There's a curve to how the knuckles are established. And as you can see, there's 3, right? There's this one and then this one. There's 3 sections to a finger. So you don't want to forget that. But the prominent ones are obviously the first in the set. First knuckle is like the most prominent one, so you're always going to kind of see it bulge out. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to define that knuckle more. Also notice how the middle finger is like the longest one, and that's pretty common for most people. The middle finger is the longest one, then the index finger, and then it's the ring finger. But I think between the ring finger and the index finger, that also is in range as well. Sometimes they're like about the same size, depending on person. But as you could see, even on the hand, there's that curvature to it. So just naturally from the longest finger going down towards the pinky, they just kind of descend. So that's what we're going to do here. We got the index finger that's longer than the ring finger. And then finally, the pinky being the shortest. So I'm going to create a dip right here. That's where there's the bend. You know, if we're looking at the whole hand, there's 4 parts to where 3 parts where they bend, really, and 4 sections. You got the palm, or the back of the hand. You got the first bone structure, then the knuckle, then another bone structure, then knuckle again. So 3 knuckles to deal with. And sometimes that becomes confusing because you're like, wait, was it 3 or 2? Because you're thinking from the finger. There's 2 knuckles on the finger, but 3 if you include the knuckle on the hand, or the back of the hand. 3 knuckles in total, 2 knuckles on the finger. And that's something that it's important, and this is something that I mentioned before, writing it down. So when you're learning these principles and there are certain things to remember, that's one of them. There's 2 knuckles on the finger, 3 knuckles in total, including the hand. And you could just write it to remember next time when you sit down to draw, then you review what you were doing, and you could just flip back and you could be like, oh, right, that's it. And then when you're starting to draw hands, it'll eventually come to that point and you'll remember, right, it's supposed to be 3 knuckles in total. So we got like the first bump, and even despite me explaining this stuff to you guys, there's nothing better. Like, there's nothing that I could possibly say in words that will make you draw a hand better than practicing it and drawing from real life and using examples and drawing them over and over again. That's the one and only way you're going to get better at drawing hands. No words can magically do it for you. But these are just tips to remind yourself of these principles and things to look out for as you're drawing to make it easier for you not to look at your drawing and be like, what's wrong with it? What's going on over here? Why doesn't it look right? So as you could see, I did a little disservice by drawing out the structure of it a little bit darker than I should have, but it's coming along. You could start to see that it resembles a hand more and more, and we started with something as basic as this. Now again, this is just a part of the process. This is the stepping stone. You'll eventually be able to draw hands without having to refer to such structure and so many steps. You'll be able to just eye it and do it, but you have to first train yourself in order to be able to do this by just eyeing it. It's like a perfect example of what I was saying before. It's like the ABCs. You're not going to jump into reading like the most difficult text before you start learning the alphabet, or before you figure out how to pronounce the letters and certain words. You're not going to intimidate yourself by reading War and Peace or whatnot. You'll start off with more simple text and then gradually build up your confidence, build up your ability to understand words, their meanings, how to pronounce them, until you're able to tackle on more difficult things, and you'll be able to just read without having to enunciate each and every single word, and so on and so forth. So the same principle here. You don't want to jump into just doing the most difficult forms and shapes. You want to first learn this basic ability, the ability to draw these lines at their most basic form, and then building up from there. And then eventually you'll just draw them without having to refer to these things. Or more simple example, as I was telling you guys in the previous streams, like tying a shoe, you have like in the beginning, you first learn the methods, you think about them, you're like, okay, I do this, then I do that, and this is the next step, and that's the next step, and then eventually I could tie a knot. And now you don't think about it, right? You don't sit there and wondering like, what do I, should I get a guide to how to do it? You just do it. And that's because you've trained yourself, you've done it over and over again, but first you kept the guides and the methods in mind very consciously at the beginning. So the same thing ends up happening with this. So stick with it, and eventually you won't even have to rely on this. And if you do this at least 3 times a week, I mean, even twice a week, or even once a week, considering it's just a stepping stone, you could start with once a week, build to twice, 3, 4th, etc. But to get really good results, to get quick results, or rather faster improvement, 3 times a week, 4 is great, 5 is excellent, and if you do it every day, you are bound to really, really skyrocket your skills and abilities in no time. So I don't want to go way too much into detail of it. I just wanted to show you guys like how you could create a basic structure for yourself. And remember to always keep it light. So with that said, I want to jump back to drawing the head and just showing you guys some examples of like how you could shade. Same ideas, we'll discuss it again. We'll talk about the same principles here. And we will start by drawing a circle, right? The most crucial shape, basic shape. Then we do the cup shape for the chin area. Notice I'm keeping it light as well. Then we do the crosshair in the middle because this is really important. You don't want to start without it. You don't want to be learning to draw without that step. And I'll show you as we go along. I like to do just 3 lines to show you and to show myself where certain parts of the mouth are, where certain parts of the nose are, and so on and so forth. So with the eyes, being on the line, let's say, the nose right here. And this is why it's so important to have this crosshair in the middle. Or center lines, rather. Is so that you make sure that things are centered and they're proportionate. You don't want to draw the eye like all the way over here and the other one a little too close, that's gonna look wonky. And the same thing for the nose. The nose is between the eyes, and you want to make sure that that's the case. Once you draw the eyes, that the nose really does place itself right in the middle, and these guides help you do that. And same thing with the mouth. So just give yourself these quick little guiding areas, and then from there, just like within a hand, right, you build up from that. keeping in mind, like this is the front face perspective. So with doing that, the bottom of the eyes also have to line up. It's not just the top. You have to make sure that the bottom of the eyes line up, and also check to make sure that the eye width is the same. And that's something that I've noticed even in professional work. Like there was an artist that I was looking at not too long ago, back in the day, back in the 90s, and I saw some of the drawings of the faces, and great artist, amazing work, but in some cases, like one of the eyes is like huge, even though it's further away from the camera in comparison to the other one, or it's kind of drifting a little too far to the left. So it's just another principle, and we all make these mistakes here and there, but it's important to keep in mind what you need to improve, what you need to improve, what makes your drawing much better, and these are the things to do that. You want to make sure you remember they play a major role in making your drawing look good or look weird. So yeah, make sure that the width of the eyes are the same on both sides, and make sure that the eye isn't going too far touching like the side of the face. Right, so we got this right here. The ears usually start right about where the eyes start, at the top, like at the top of the eyes. That's where the ears really begin. The eyebrows are just right above them. And also notice the space difference between the objects again, right? You don't want the eyebrows to be like way up here. You know, you're not zoomed in. Like if you're super zoomed in on the face, that distance between the eyebrow and the eye itself increases. But when you're zoomed out, when you're zoomed out, that distance is smaller. Just like most things in perspective, the further you get away from them, the smaller they get. The closer you get to them, the bigger they get. So it's kind of the same idea here. Pay attention to the space difference between the eyebrow and the eye. You don't want it too big. And then we're going to draw the iris. And then here is like the biggest mistake that people make is the distance between the nostril and the eye. That is like one of the biggest mistakes also that people make, is that they make it way too long. Especially beginners, like people who are just starting out, they don't really pay attention to that detail, and it makes a world of a difference. You don't want that gap between like the tip of the nostril where it ends and, let's say, the corner of the eye, which is usually where it starts. That's how you kind of measure the distance, the proportion. Is like the inside of the eye. If you make a line straight down to the nostril, they kind of touch. And that's when you could tell, like, okay, it's not, the eyes aren't coming or like crossing or coming closer and closer together, because that's going to also look weird. Now the rest of the stuff really does vary from person to person, but as a general rule, also with the bottom or the top of the lip, actually, it's not too far away from the nose. And it's not touching it either. I mean, in certain cases, you'll see like people exaggerating those features and stuff and making them look stylized and stylish and stuff. But you want to first get down these basic principles and then play around with them. You know, just because that trains your ability to see detail. And that's something that could carry over into your style, into your personal work or whatnot, work from imagination. The ability to see detail and put it down on paper, recognize it, and draw it out. And that, as I mentioned, like the first stream, that's something that's essential, even if you're doing like abstract work. Like if you were to check out the first stream, I was talking about Picasso, and I was showing you guys like the comparison between his early work when he was like a younger student maybe, or was just doing personal work on his own. He studied realistic work, like hyperrealism almost. Not exactly hyperrealism, but realism to a point where you could differentiate what's going on the face. Whereas when I say Picasso, people think of as like more abstract portraits where the face is like kind of like a jigsaw puzzle and it's like all over the place. But yeah, he took the time to actually study realism because it really does help train your hand-eye coordination, train your hand to make beautiful different variations of lines, not just basic straight lines. And and that's actually something that you'll notice between people who are more experienced in drawing and those who are just starting out, is that their lines are very much simplified because they haven't trained. They haven't challenged themselves to draw or see lines beyond their simple form, or beyond just like the most the easiest way to draw it. So you'll see people trying to draw fingers and they'll draw like popsicle sticks and forget about the knuckles and not pay attention to how it like tapers off more towards the end. It's not exactly the same size and width going all the way from the beginning of the finger to the tip of it. It tapers. So like, people really, since they're inexperienced, they want to get down the general drawing or start drawing, and they'll just draw the most simple forms instead, rather than like taking the time being like, oh, okay, here's a line I didn't notice, here's a shape I didn't notice, let me try to draw it exactly as I see it, and slow things down and really try to nail it. But I wanted to show you guys just starting from the very basic shape of circle and the chin, and then just using these guidelines to establish the limits of face features. And I'll do it again just to show you guys like the shading principle. So circle, I got the cub shape. We got the reference lines for the eyes, nose, and mouth. eyebrows. The ears start right where the eyes are, or the line for the guideline for the eyes, and end right about where the mouth is. Not mouth, sorry, where the nose is. It's about the same. The end right about where the end of the tip of the nose. That's where ears are. But that also varies. Again, you could just learn different variations by drawing from life, drawing people and stuff, but just to get your eye used to like the standard average face. Okay, so we got the light source, let's say, coming from here. You want to make sure that all parts of the face follow that light source. You don't want to like shade the nose on the right side and then shade the rest of the face on the left. Just doesn't make any sense, right? Like totally opposing light sources. On one end, for the side of the face, it seems like the light source is coming from here, whereas for the nose, the light source is coming from here, and it's a very dramatic shadow, as if though the light source is like very close to the face. So you want to make sure that you don't make that mistake. Be consistent with your light source. We're gonna wipe that out. Just I'm just gonna give them like basic forms for it. So now the shadows are much more complicated on the face than this, but just for the sake of showing you guys how important it is to be consistent, it makes a world of a difference in your drawing. You know, again, let's just do it for this one as an example. You can see it doesn't really look as good. It doesn't make much sense. It breaks up like the illusion of the image itself, whereas over here, your eye kind of, it makes more sense to the eye when looking at this, because you could see, okay, the shadow for the nose, since the light is coming from here, it's casting the shadow from the nose on the right side of the face. And since there's shape and there's form to the head, it's going to bevel, and the further it bevels away from the light source, the more shadow there's going to be. As you study or draw from real life, you'll notice certain lines, like here for the cheekbone, and then under the lip, and then especially under the chin where the neck is. You'll notice that there's shadows there as well. And the more, like I was mentioning, the further away it is from the light source, the darker those shadows will be. So hopefully this kind of explained it for you guys. Really, I just wanted to focus more on the shape of the head and where certain parts of the head are, the guidelines, and especially how the light source hits the face and parts of the head. I'm going to do a quick sketch of profile as well to demonstrate it, and I'm going to have to end it for the Drawing Basics stream for today. But I will be back tomorrow, same time and place. I will try my best to work on the audio problems. I don't know what is going on with it. Just so that I could start the stream earlier and just not have to put you guys through that. Trust me, it's pretty frustrating for myself as well. So the same idea, it comes for the profile. And again, this is like the most basic form of it. But this time, notice that the cup shape is, depending on if you're doing it to the left or the right, the profile view is to the left or the right, you could see that the cup shape is starting from the side. We still included the guidelines, the crosshair in the middle of it. This is just to demonstrate the tilt of the angle, right? You could do that to help yourself see, okay, is the tilt of the cup shape, is it right? And then we're going to add the neck. And now you will see how this this guideline right here, these two guidelines will help in drawing the profile. So it starts off pretty much the easiest way is to just start out like a flat front of the face right here. And then from there, you could draw like a triangle shape for the nose. Now this is another thing, just like the distance between the nostril and the eye, and the side of the head and the eye. This is another thing to look out for. When you're drawing in profile view, how far is the eye from the nose? You don't want to draw it like touching basically the nose itself, and you don't want it to be like way above where the dip between the brow line and the nose is. You don't want it to be way above that or way below it. So just look out for it, study it on people, and also notice how far away it is from the nostril, the eye from the nostril itself, like this gap right here. I don't know if you guys could see it. I could try to bring it a little bit closer, but the distance between the nostril here and the eye. That makes a world of a difference as well. So notice how it's under the horizontal line, the horizontal guiding line. And now that we've established also where the nose and the nostril is, we could draw the line to where the ear ends. So the ear starts on the vertical line, the vertical guiding line, and ends It's at an angle, it ends right where the nose ends, pretty much. So it's on the same line. And then right below it is where the mouth is. Now we can go further into detail by drawing like the lip, and the lip obviously jots out more. It's not just flat. But that's just, that's going further and further into detail. We're just trying to keep it more on the simple side right now. I'm going to use I'm going to use a pencil and just quickly go over this to show you guys. And again, this is just something for you guys to take notes of, like literally write things down to make it easier for yourself to remember, because despite me explaining it, it's one thing to hear and it's another thing to actually try to replicate with your hand-eye coordination. So just things to keep in mind as you're drawing to help you improve your drawing gradually over and over again. And the best way to learn is practicing and drawing from life. So we started out with something as simple as a circle, kind of an egg shape, and then it turned into a full face feature. So I hope you found this helpful, guys. If you have any questions, if you need a little bit more explanation on certain parts, or get better idea of certain parts of the face, leave a comment either on Twitch or social media. I'll write you guys back, or I'll talk about it in the next stream. I'm gonna clip it off here for the basic stream, and I will be back in, what time is it? It's like 4:09. Wow, time flies. Yeah, like 4:15. I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and I will be back for the Drawing Comics stream. So stick around, guys. I'll see you in the next one.